when you're talking about high performers or people who excel, people who have the humility to prepare and then the confidence to go execute. Whether it was law school or jumping in as a lawyer or getting into the broadcast field, some of the experiences I had as a younger person gave me the confidence to say, this is going to be hard and I may fail at this, but I'm not afraid of this. I'm not afraid of failing.
Today we're going to meet somebody that defines toughness, mental toughness, differently than most. Somebody who has authored a book on the topic, but that's not what he's actually most known for. Even though he's an attorney, an author, a former pro basketball player overseas, and so much more, a father, a husband. This individual is a highly recognized and respected mind in basketball when it comes to the collegiate level, NBA, and continues to be a guiding force when it comes to what it takes to analyze, what it takes to make something of yourself. And I'm so humbled to introduce today Mr. Jay Bilas. How are you today, sir?
Jonathan, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. You're very kind.
It's cool to talk to you. We were just talking a bit before we got on that I've been watching the NBA draft since I was 13 years old, maybe 14, and your opinions are always highlighted when it comes to ESPN and any other major broadcast news network. And the depth behind your career that's actually more impressive than the way you look at the game. And in studying for this interview, preparing for this, I got to know you through your work. And the fact that you wrote a book on mental toughness is where I want to start. How do you define toughness and why is it so important?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, when I was a player, I think toughness wasn't really defined for us. It was talked about a lot by our coaches and mentors, but it was never really defined. And to me, as a player, it was easy to play with and hard to play against. That's what I thought of. And honestly, the reason I wrote the book wasn't to highlight things I knew about toughness. It was sort of a learning experience for me, and a lot of my experiences were where I fell short. And so I decided to seek out people that I knew and learned from over the years to get them to help me define it, and realize through writing it that there wasn't a lot of work in that space. I think, whether it's grit or resilience, perseverance, things like that. Yeah, I do see books about that now. But when I wrote the book, it was a really interesting journey. One, in writing a book, because I'd never done that before. But the most rewarding part of it, Jonathan, was the aftermath of the book. And the article that I wrote on it was, I got feedback and people reaching out from literally all over the world in every walk of life. I still today get letters from coaches and teams and players. And the best part of that book was that teams or units, whatever, business groups may use the book and start conversations among themselves and highlight or define what it means to them. The fact that so many people have shared those conversations, how they've used the book, has really been uplifting for me and really fulfilling. So it was not something I necessarily want to do again, because writing a book is I have a lot more respect for the authors of books. It's a tough deal, but it was really fulfilling to write it.
Of all the things that I ever thought that I'd be talking to you about, I feel like just basketball would be the first thing, right? But in learning about your career as an attorney, as a student of the game of life, why grit, toughness, mental toughness in specific was so important to you. Why that particular topic? What was it about the substance of mental toughness that spoke to you that made you want to go as far as write a book and become an authority on the topic?
I think from the time I was a young kid getting going in sports, toughness was always something. I don't want to say I struggled with it, because I do think I had some toughness as an athlete and as a person, but I never considered myself kind of as tough as my dad. And to me, that was the standard. When I got to college, playing for Coach K is a tough guy. And you started playing against guys that were really tough and playing with them. It helped you raise your standard of what it meant. And the book came from something as simple as I was watching a basketball game, studying or preparing, kind of scouting a game. And, an announcer just like me had praised a player that I thought was just kind of being a bully out there and talked about him being tough. And for some reason it resonated with me. And I said, well, that's not what tough means to me. And it motivated me and inspired me to write an article about it, of what toughness means in basketball. So I did that. Nobody asked me to do it. I sent it in to my editor at ESPN.com. And basically, when I sent it in, just said, hey, look, you didn't ask me to do this. I felt strongly about this. If you can use it, great. If not, no expectations. Just see what you think. And they put it up on the site and it just kind of blew up. And the book idea came from my wife after the feedback I got on the article, honestly. So I really delved into it. And every story, I think, in the book that related to me were areas of my life where I fell short in the toughness area. And again, like, I don't think I'm without toughness. I'm not arguing I'm the toughest guy on the block, because I'm not. The things I learned throughout my career in sports, out of sports, in broadcasting, in law, school, you name it. You just real life stuff. And the people I learned from, I learned a lot writing the book, and the fact that so many people have found it helpful to them. Some of the most moving things have been something as simple as a high school kid who had tried to make his high school team 2 or 3 times and didn't make it, and then read the book and used some of the principles from it and latched onto it, and then all of a sudden made his or her high school team. It wasn't like some elite, I know I've had NFL coaches have told me, hey, they used it with their team. And that's happened in a number of different sports and different walks of life. Non-elite athlete that reached the dream of making a team. That was really a cool thing for me. I really enjoyed that.
So it's funny how you initially respond to authority, because I'm thinking about it, right? We're both attorneys. And so when I think about authority, I think about someone who's informed, someone who's credible, someone who's written about the topic, someone who's interviewed other individuals on the topic, multiple individuals at an elite level, who has direct experience practicing the principles, who's someone who's made sure that they've investigated thoroughly before expressing their opinions. And so when I refer to authority on the topic, it is intended to be as a resource, someone who has dedicated an extensive amount of time to studying the depth that is this particular topic that I personally love. I have a background as a SVU criminal prosecutor, and before that, ex-Israeli military, and I also struggled to make my high school basketball team, and all of these things made me question my own reality. So how you talk about someone that you heard describing what tough is, I believe that mental toughness is a practice. I believe it consists of all these things you outlined: perseverance, grit, fortitude, resilience. And one of my favorite definitions of resilience is that it's suffering strategically managed, meaning you're not just trying to keep the pebble in the shoe and run for the sake of being tough, but actually have strategy behind whatever the endeavor is that's in front of you. As someone who has this legal background, how has it impacted your ability to ask effective questions when you interview or when you investigate? How has your legal career impacted your media and sports career?
Oh, I think my legal training, whether it be law school or the practice of law and being associated with my law firm for the last 32 years, has made me honestly a different person. And I don't know if this will resonate with you, but before I went to law school, I could have a discussion with friends of mine, or to the point of arguing a position. And if somebody disagreed with me, there are times, you get your feelings hurt over it. That went away when I went to law school. I was able to separate the argument from the person making the argument. And it wasn't about my feelings anymore. And I started to look at issues where having a vigorous debate about an issue, even if I got out argued, was a good thing, that it helped me stress test my position. And if somebody had a better argument, then I changed my position. And if my argument were to win, sort of stress testing my argument solidified my position and helped me expand on it and test it. So it kind of made me better in all those different ways. And I think I learned how to argue and to separate the argument from the person. And so if I have a critical thing to say on a basketball broadcast or something, it's not a personal thing. That's been really helpful. But I think law school and being a lawyer for so many years I don't have all the answers. No lawyer does. But I think the training that we received as lawyers has helped us with the ability to find the right answer. That's a confidence builder that, I'm able to say, I don't know, but I can find out. I'm going to find out. You can find the right answer. So I think it made me a lot more confident. And then after all the things you go through as a lawyer, whether it's making an argument in front of a judge or in a federal appeals level or you name it, after doing all those things, when a little red light comes on a TV camera, that doesn't throw me anymore. Maybe when I first started, that might have been an issue, but after you go through legal training, you're not going to worry about some little red light. That's not going to be an issue.
A couple of things you said resonated. In terms of taking things personally, I was actually at the DA's office in the Bronx, and that's where I learned to stop taking things so personally, because when the arguments started focusing on me as an individual rather than the substance of the case, I started to internalize, like, oh my God, what do you mean I'm unethical? What do you mean this or that, the other thing? And then I started to realize it was a tactic. And once I kind of flipped the switch, I was like, I've been wasting so much time thinking that there's something wrong with me, but really it's that they have no case. So now I can flip the script. And the other thing that you said that resonated was about how you don't know all the answers, but you can know how to look for the right answer. I had a professor in law school who literally verbatim said that people are going to come to you thinking that you know all the answers. And the truth is, you'll have the skill to know how to research the right answer. So I think that's a very important sentiment that you brought up. We're going to jump around a bit, but I wanted to ask you earlier. You spent some time overseas playing in Italy and in Spain, even though you were drafted by the Mavs. So, how did that experience playing overseas impact your mental toughness, impact you as a person? Because living in another country is an intense experience. How did it impact you?
All positive. There were difficulties with it because you're so far away from home. So my first year in playing in Italy, I grew up in Los Angeles and I went to college at Duke, 2,500, 3,000 miles away, whatever it is. I was a little bit used to being away from home, but it's one thing to be away from home in the United States, and it's another thing to be, across the Atlantic. And my first year in Italy, I think the thing I was most grateful for was I immersed myself in the Italian culture. I learned how to speak Italian. I already spoke Spanish, so it's a Romance language, so it's pretty easy or relatively easy for me to learn Italian from Spanish. But I really enjoyed the experience. I was single at the time and young and making money and playing, and I really enjoyed it. The only issue that I had was when I came home for the summer. It took me a while, honestly, to feel like an American again. And then by the time I got used to being at home, it was time for me to go back. It's not like I was being deployed in the military or anything. Playing basketball is easy in that regard, or compared to that. But I did play with other American players that didn't have that same sort of immersive experience. They felt separated, and that makes it more difficult. But I loved it, and I would have played 10 or 12 years. I just got an opportunity to do something else after three. season. So for me, it was the right time to kind of move forward with some other things, law school included. And I was an assistant on Coach K's staff as a grad assistant for 3 years. So that was great. But I loved playing, and I honestly wanted to play longer, but circumstances made it where I just had, honestly, Jonathan, a better opportunity, so I had to take it.
There's this Renaissance man element to who you are: writer, author, attorney, pro basketball player, broadcaster, multiple languages, studying at a top tier university for undergrad and for law school. Where does all this stem from? Is it a curiosity? Is it a calling? How can someone who maybe doesn't have those same interests but wants to explore different areas of the world, their life, how can they cultivate that same kind of curiosity that you seem to have cultivated over a fruitful career?
It was honestly my parents. It had very little to do with me. I grew up, I think I mentioned, in Southern California, and both of my parents were born in a town called San Pedro, near the port of Los Angeles. And my mom encouraged me to do a lot of different things. I never really kind of delved into it with her, but I believe that she wanted me to be cultured and be have experience in a lot of different areas. I think she might have been a little bit concerned that I was going to be just an athlete that went to school to go to school and then just wanted to play. They were actually requirements when I was younger. My mom, I use the word encourage to be charitable, but she made me do a lot of things. And so when I was younger, I had to take ballroom dancing courses, and I wound up actually being a competitive ballroom dancer when I was a kid. And it was not something that I broadcast to my friends because I was not happy about it. But she wanted me to do that. And, this is back in the 1970s, early 80s. She also put me into speech and debate courses when I was in junior high and high school. And I wound up meeting a teacher, having a teacher that became really influential in my life. His name was Billy Kramer. And so taking these speech and debate courses led to, they call them forensics competitions. And we went to them all around Southern California. It's kind of like that movie Mean Girls, where I was almost like a mathlete or something. And I didn't broadcast that either. I didn't want my friends really knowing I was doing that. But those competitions put me in really uncomfortable situations in competing in speech and debate. And that made it to where, the broadcast stuff didn't throw me. I might not have been good at it when I started. Maybe I'm not good at it now, but it didn't, nothing scared me after going through that. That was scarier than anything I've ever really done. And I was really lucky that Mr. Kramer, this teacher of mine, happened to get a job. He left my junior high school to get a job at the high school I went to when I was going into ninth grade. So I had him for like 7 years in a row. And he was really influential, and as influential as any coach I ever had. When I was going into my senior year of high school, he basically required me to act in the school play. I'd never really done anything like that before, and he said, "You're gonna be the lead in this play." It was Lillian Hellman's "Watch on the Rhine," which was a kind of heady stuff for high school kids. But I did it, and it was pretty grueling. The rehearsals were long, and we did the production ran for about a week, and I wound up winning an award for it. I won the Best Actor award from Bank of America in our area, I guess. And I didn't want to accept the award because I thought, there are other people who've spent their whole kind of young lives dedicated in that area, and I was a basketball player and an athlete, and kind of jumped into this, and then all of a sudden I win this award that so many of my fellow students in that area had coveted, and I didn't want to take it. And he strong armed me into it and basically said, "You will accept this award. You will accept it with appropriate pride." Because I told him I'm not an actor. And he goes, "You're right. You're not an actor. You're an award winning actor." And that was really kind of a transformational experience for me to go through that kind of thing and all these speech and debate things, even that dance stuff. I was afraid to do it when I did it. And then after I did it, some of that fear went away. And then it allowed me to not be as afraid. I was afraid to go to law school. I was really concerned that I couldn't hack it because I'm going to Duke Law School with all these Ivy League students that killed it in undergrad, and I was a good student, but I wasn't in their league, and that was important for me to go through too. That I could slug through it and get the job done.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the episode. I'm reading this book now by a Navy SEAL, Rich Diviney, and he co-wrote it with Simon Sinek. And the book is entitled Attributes. Rich is going to be coming on the pod in the next few weeks. I'm preparing, and I want to make sure that I familiarize myself with these concepts. And so he talks about the discrepancy between skills and attributes, and how how attributes are inherent and skills can be acquired. And that when put in certain situations, attributes like courage can be amplified so that our true nature is revealed. And so, in listening to how you're talking about your experience around going through ballroom dancing, acting, playing ball, applying to law school, learning multiple languages, it sounds like there is this well rounding that helped you kind of see the world and be open to new experiences. And then part of being open to new experiences sounds like also allowed you to have positive influences. And so you mentioned Coach K, but like I'm sure you also met some incredible people while you're playing in Europe in law school. Obviously, your network now is very robust from professional athletes, broadcasters, and the like. What's the through line that you see amongst high performers? And I'm curious from your perspective in particular, because of all your real world experience, what are some of the common attributes, themes, skills that you've noticed in being around people that perform at a high level of excellence?
Humility is number one. Going into a situation, you sort of have the humility to prepare and the confidence to pull it off. And I think your confidence comes from your preparation. But I think you go into I was told once, and I don't remember who said this, but everybody you meet knows something you don't know. And so, especially being around my dad, who, my father had his own business. He was in television sales and service from the time I was a little kid. He was a commercial fisherman before I was born, but he was basically had a TV sales and service business. So, when I was a kid, your TV was like furniture. It was like a big console, and they were expensive and all that. And when it broke, you called my dad and he fixed it. He probably sold it to you, then fixed it when something went wrong with it. I learned a lot from my dad about hard work and figuring things out because he always figured things out. I probably wasn't very good at that when I was younger. Pretty impatient with things and maybe more shortcut oriented. And that was not him. He planned for something. He was one of those guys, measured twice, cut once type guy. When you're talking about high performers or people who excel, people who have the humility to prepare and then the confidence to go execute. And that was my dad. He didn't have the same luck I did of birth and being able to go to college and have the experiences I had. He and my mom set me up for that, and my brother and my sisters. But I think if he had the sort of the experiences I had, he probably would have done more with it than I did, I think. Whether it was law school or jumping in as a lawyer or getting into the broadcast field, some of the experiences I had as a younger person gave me the confidence to say, okay, this is going to be hard and I may fail at this, but I'm not afraid of this. I'm not afraid of failing. I still get, I get nervous like everybody else when you have a challenge in front of you. And I think that's a good thing, can be a good thing, but I'm not worried about falling short anymore. And maybe I was as a kid, but I'm not afraid of the outcome of things that I try. That's, I think, a real positive too for high achievers is, the acknowledgement that I may fail at this, but it's not going to stop me from trying it and from, putting myself out there. And I think that's important. I've always tried to do that. And one of the things, Jonathan, that I've tried to do in my life is I don't like to say no before I do something. I can always quit later, but I'm not going to quit before I start. And that's how I got into broadcasting. Honestly, I was practicing law, and I got an opportunity to get into broadcasting, and I got offered a job. And as long as it didn't negatively affect my law practice, I was going to do it. I got offered a job as a radio analyst. It didn't pay very much, and it required a lot of time. But I thought it would have been easy for me to say, you know what, I'm not going to do this because I don't want it to affect my law practice. But I was like, hey, if it negatively affects my law practice, I'll quit. But I'm not going to quit before I start. And if I had said no to that, I never would have gotten into the broadcast field. I'd be, not just, I'd be a full-time lawyer. And having that openness and lack of fear of, hey, I may screw this up. I may not be able to do it, but I'm not going to say no before I try it. And I gave it my best effort, and it worked out pretty well for me. I was lucky.
There's a couple questions that I have from that, but more notably, time management. It may sound a bit cliche, but like you said, you didn't want this opportunity as a broadcaster, which obviously has led you to become who you are as ESPN's top collegiate basketball analyst. But in terms of how you've managed your time around maintaining this law practice and also being an investigative reporter, also a broadcaster, among all these other hats that you wear, how have you allocated your time? Do you have systems in place? If so, what has worked for you in terms of performing to the degree that you do that's led to the results that you have?
That's a really good question. I think I learned a lot from my dad there. I think my dad, if he were here, would probably say he doesn't believe in multitasking. In other words, my dad did a lot of things in a day. He got a lot accomplished, and he planned his day out and all that. But his day may change at a drop of a hat, and mine was the same in a different field. But my dad never did two things at once and tried to do two things at once. He wasn't trying to juggle multiple things. He did one thing and did it right and finished it, and then he moved on to the next thing and put the last thing in his rearview mirror. And I remember when I was in high school, my dad did not give me a lot of advice. He let me do my thing, and he was there to guide, but he wasn't like micromanaging me. And I really appreciated that, especially when I got older, but and didn't give me a lot of feedback in basketball, things like that. He went to the game, watched it. As long as I behaved myself and did my best, he didn't have anything to say. I remember one time I had a game. I didn't play particularly well. I was bothered by some things that were going on in my, the rest of my world. And he did ask me afterwards, he says, what was bothering you? And I said, I got so much going on. I got this test coming up, and I got this, and my girlfriend this, or whatever it was. I don't even remember all the things I complained about. And I remember him saying, it's okay for you to concentrate fully for the 2 hours you're playing that game. There's nothing you could do about that test while you were playing. You devoted that time to playing basketball. And nothing you thought about outside of basketball was going to do you any good. It wasn't going to make you a better student, wasn't going to make you a better friend, wasn't going to make you a better boyfriend. None of that mattered. And he said, but as soon as the game's over, you got to move on to the next thing. And when you're in class all day, you got a game that night, it doesn't do you any good to think about the game while you're in class. And my dad, one of the things that he really wasn't big on being upset after the game. Like kind of, you lose a game or something and you're down in the dumps and you're upset and you're mad. And he's like, what are you mad about? There's nothing you do about it now. You should have been mad during the game. And he would not have been a fan of like some players that after the game, they may not behave at the highest level of sportsmanship because they're mad that they lost. And their excuse is, well, I'm a competitor. No, the competition's over. Like that's it. That would have been his thing. And it was his thing. Competition's over. If it meant so much to you to be mad about it now, you should have been mad during the game. And you should have put that into the game. This doesn't do you any good. Move on. Move on to the next thing. Because he got something done, he moved on to the next thing. And Coach K had a saying for that. He used to call it next play. And something's going to happen in a game. You're going to make a play, not make a play, turnover, mistake, whatever. His thing was move on right away. By thinking about the last play, whether it's positive or negative, whether you're celebrating or lamenting, you're taking yourself out mentally from making the next play if you're thinking about the last one. We watch the film later and break down what we did right and wrong, but you got to move on right away. And so that's always been a trigger for me since I played for Coach K was next play. And I try to say it to myself a lot in whatever I do. The hardest thing is in golf when you get a bad shot, you need to move on. I don't do that very well. But in most other areas, I do a pretty good job of, at next play, let's move on. We screwed that up. We'll fix it and we'll move on instead of kind of beating yourself up. And so I think as I've gotten older, I've become kinder to myself in that regard.
You mentioned the idea of not multitasking. I had a professor in law school, ironically, is coming up twice in this interview, who said there's no such thing as multitasking. It's called rapid serial switching because the brain can't do more than one thing at once. So it just goes back and forth like that really, really fast. When I hear you talk about that singular focus and that the value of presence in your life and understanding, and it sounds like in your father's life as well, where you got to eliminate all distractions and be where your feet are and stay grounded in the moment without letting other things get to you. I think especially in today's day and age where I'm victim to it in the sense that I need to hold myself more accountable when I'm not present in my life. And I practice presence as much as I possibly can, putting my phone down, being with my daughter, being with my wife. When I'm training, I train with no headphones, I train barefoot. I try to be as grounded and present as I possibly can be in everything that I do. But it is a practice. It is something that can't just be like, oh, boom, one day you have it. You could be really good at it, but it is something that we have to constantly work at. And you mentioned Coach K. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you what are some of the greatest teachings or lessons that sit with you on a day to day basis outside of next play that you garnered as a player of Coach K's, as a assistant coach of his, and as a friend and colleague? How has his influence in your life impacted you?
Coach K's influence has been profound. I think aside from my parents and my wife, Coach K has been the most profound influence in my life without question. And I think I would be a totally different person had I not met him, not played for him, not had the benefit of his mentorship and friendship throughout the years. I mean, I've known him for since what 1980, 80, 81, whatever. So it's like 43 years or so. It's really extraordinary. And I played for him at the right time for me. My first year playing for him was his third year at Duke. And so, I mean, he was a head coach at Duke for 40 plus years. And, throughout my adult life, and having your coach stay where you played for all that time period was really beneficial. And how lucky was I? Just the idea of the mental preparation to play and compete. I think he elevated our ability to compete rather than play. And he had a great feel for people and relationships. And I think he really taught all of us what it really means to be a great teammate. His priorities are completely in order, and I took great lessons from that. The ability to prepare, and then I think he had a great balance of holding you accountable at the highest standard, but still giving you the ability to play and perform with a free mind. I don't remember like being paralyzed by fear or anything that if I made a mistake, I was going to hear it from him. You mostly heard it from Coach K if you made what he would call a mistake of omission. If you failed to do something you were supposed to do, and usually it was a mental thing. If you made what he called the mistake of commission, if you missed a shot or didn't get a rebound you were going for because somebody was just better at getting to it, you probably didn't weren't going to hear from him. But if you didn't give the effort you were supposed to, if you made a mental error, a concentration error, if you weren't in the right moment, if you weren't in the moment as you should be, kind of throwing yourself into what you were doing, where it wasn't about you, it was about us, and then you'd hear from him. And I always really respected that. And Jonathan, the thing that I'm perhaps most grateful for was I think we were all way more than players to him. That were it not for Coach K, I would not have gone to law school. I do not think I would have gotten into broadcasting were it not for Coach K. He helped me. It kind of greased the skids for me for law school. My parents did too. They really encouraged me to go, but Coach K was influential in making that happen. And then he was really influential in making the broadcast thing happen because he, right out of high school, got me a job with ABC Sports through a Duke alum. And I started working in the industry as a production assistant when I was 18, 19 years old. And I did it every summer that I was in college. I worked for ABC Sports. That really opened up a lot of doors for me. And it was incredibly instrumental. And without him having that foresight and thinking beyond what we're all able to do as players, I don't know where I'd be without him, honestly.
I've heard you talk about this before about how decisions reveal priorities. And you're such a wealth of information just based on the world experience that you have. What does that mean to you? How can people internalize that sentiment?
I first heard that phrase, your decisions reveal your priorities, from Jeff Van Gundy, a colleague of mine at ESPN that coached in the NBA forever. And I think he got that from Pat Riley. I'm not positive of that, but I believe that's true. And when I first heard him say that, it was revelatory to me because, you can, I could sit and say, basketball is my number one priority. But if I had a game coming up and I was going out with my friends at night and not taking care of myself, not getting the appropriate sleep, well, was that really my priority? I mean, my decisions reflected that it wasn't my priority. And people say, well, my family's my priority. And then they miss family events to do something for themselves. There are certain things, like there are certain have tos in life. You're going to miss certain things. I get that. But I think, especially my wife taught me, my wife's got her priorities in order better than anybody I've ever met. And she's more comfortable in her own skin and knows what's important more than anyone I've ever met. And she really helped me with priorities. My wife and I put each other first, and together we put our family first. And so, like, she was number one to me in our family. I put her number one, and she put me number one. But the two of us together put our kids and our family number one, if that makes sense. And so she was always a great guide for me on, look, there's certain things, I have to do for work and all that. But she really guided me to, no, this is really important. You need to focus on this. You need to be here for this and be, as you said, be present for it. Don't just be there. Be there with 100% of your being. I mean, she's tougher than I am, but she knows what's important more than anyone I've ever met, and that's helped me kind of identify what's important and what's important to us. But priorities. You're gonna show what your priorities are by what your actions are. And I had a coach, Bo Ryan in Wisconsin. He used to say, he used to talk about coaching and said, in coaching, it's not what you say, it's what you accept. And, I thought about that with parenting. As a parent, you say a lot of things, but what did I accept? And it's the same for me, like in my priorities. Like, what do my actions are going to show what my priorities are, not what I say they are.
It's funny you say that because I just released an interview with Dr. John DeMartini, who's a human behavior specialist, and he is very big on values. and he says that people usually share social idealisms when they're asked what their values are, and he focuses more on what people do as an indication of what their values are. So I'm glad that you echoed those sentiments by and large. The last question and a half that I'll pose to you in the couple minutes that we have left, and again, I appreciate this time and insight, and I know the audience does as well. I've seen you sit down with some pretty impactful voices and presences across college athletics, Rick Pitino, among many more. And you've had to pose some very difficult questions at some very highly delicate and highly publicized times. What did that mean to you? And how are you able to compartmentalize to perform in a way that allowed you to extract the necessary information to provide the audience with the necessary facts to make their own determinations? Meaning, how were you able to perform effectively and ask good questions in an interview when the stakes were high with a high profile interviewee, if you will?
I think my legal training had a lot to do with that. Whatever success I've had in those areas of as to me, whether you're a lawyer or broadcaster, when you're asking questions, you ask the questions you want answered, and I'm not responsible for the answer. I'm responsible for the question, and you let the subject talk. And it's funny, when I was practicing law and I was a litigator, I did have colleagues that felt like you don't want to ask a question where if you think the subject's gonna lie to you. And to me, I didn't worry about that, because for me, a lie was as good as the truth. You could, if you asked the question, you got the truth, great. If you got a lie, you could prove it to be a lie. But reasonable minds can differ on that. But I think the main thing I learned was you have to listen. You can ask the question, but you got to listen to the answer, because the answer might lead you to a question you hadn't planned to ask. And to me, I tried not to give away any answer in the question. I tried to ask a concise, clear question that got the subject talking. And to me, in any great interview, the subject should talk a hell of a lot more than the interview. And so that's what I try to do. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert in that area, but have some experience in it.
Jay, I appreciate the time. The last question that I pose to all my guests that I'll not pose to you is, if the future version of yourself from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
Probably something that I heard a CEO of American Century say recently. Jonathan Thomas gave a speech that I watched and said he tells his employees all the time, be kind, and be kind to yourself. I think I would hope that I could talk to my younger self and say, none of the stuff you worry about is a big deal. Like don't sweat. Yeah, kind of don't sweat the small stuff, and make sure you're keeping your eye on the ball on what's most important, and make sure that you're kind.
Jay, thank you so much today. I know you have your skills camp that I'd love to just highlight for a quick second for everyone. Please go check it out. Jay, please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Well, I'm on every social media platform at Jay Bilas, and the Jay Bilas Skills Camp you mentioned, we run every summer, and it's been a labor of love for all of us. But thank you for bringing that up. That's really kind of.
Until the next one.